Hello and welcome back to Business Today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Viewers, again today we have come with a topic which is very close to our heart. It's to do with remittance and also the impact of Brexit. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest who's been on the studio a few times on our live shows, and he's an expert in the field. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Abdul Salam, this Managing Director and CEO of Brexit UK. So welcome to the show. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Okay. For our guests, some of the guests may have seen the show first time. Could you please introduce yourself quickly?
My name is Abdul Salam. As you said, that I'm the Managing Director and Chief Executive of Brexit Exchange.
Okay. Now, for the point that we've spoken a few times about remittance, and you know that Bangladesh is very much involved, and I mean Bangladesh's economy relies a lot on the remittance and also the garment industry. Now the remittance is a big part, and what are you finding over the period of time recently? Has there been any drastic changes or anything in the fall of remittance?
In 2017, 16-17, there was a fall, global remittance to Bangladesh from around $14 billion. It came down to just under 12 billion. But last year we have seen the growth as well. I mean, we've crossed again $14 billion last year, financial year 2017-18. The fall in remittance basically didn't happen from globally, from all around the world. It's mainly it's impacted in Middle East. If you look at the remittance from Europe, where we operate, from United Kingdom and other European countries where remittance growth was there, just ourselves, our year-on-year growth is almost 30%. So we have, just to give you an example, last year, total remittance from United Kingdom to Bangladesh crossed over $1 billion. Okay. Year before, we were just under 1 billion. But if we just break down the European remittance corridor-wise, I mean UK, Italy, Spain, France, the remittance grew in Italy, almost doubled. In 2015-16, the remittance from Italy to Bangladesh was around 350 million euros. That crossed in 18 financial year, it crossed over 500 million. Million people who were migrant people who were working in Italy sent remittance to Bangladesh. So yes, of course, we do depend on remittance in Bangladesh. Contribution to the total GDP almost around 7% of remittance. So I mean, we are seeing now the growth in remittance, because Bangladesh Bank is also trying to support those organizations or banks who are outside Bangladesh, channeling remittance to Bangladesh. So they're trying to support, but there are a lot of regulatory issues that we can talk about later on in the show.
There's some regulatory issues around Bangladesh Bank, etc. I mean, what's your opinion? Is that going to make it difficult?
I mean, in payment service, since I mean, if we just look at European, Union, right, where from 2015, I think 8 onward, there were a lot of regulatory changes, especially in the non-financial sector, financial institutions who are not banks. I mean, after FSA divided into FC and Financial Conduct Authority and the other regulatory authorities, where non-financial institutions, which are us ourselves, payment services and other type of FX companies. I mean, there were a lot of changes in terms of regulations. And what happened in that is that the banks, the main banks, they were de-risking their clients, which we had on your previous show, we had these discussions. And due to the de-risking, a lot of companies have lost their license, bank accounts, because without the bank accounts, you cannot operate in business. One of the core part of payment services is you have to safeguard client funds. So if you don't have bank accounts, you cannot safeguard. And a lot of the company whose accounts closed, they moved into other global principal companies like Western Union, MoneyGram, and other companies. Now, here what happened? Over the years, we have sustained. We have kept our main priority. The focus was to be compliant. Compliance is one of the biggest investment in this sector, and our stakeholders like banks, they also want their client to be also compliant as well. So if there is any failing in compliance, then the bank doesn't want to take the responsibilities. You see, time to time you hear in the a lot of banks gets fined. Recently, just a couple of years back, Western Union got fined over over $550 million they were fined in the United States. So peoples are really when it comes to payment services, there are a lot of detail compliance regime that has to be adhered by payment service like ourselves. Now that has an impact, because people who wants to send remittance to Bangladesh and other migrant people, they want their remittance to be sent in the easiest and quickest way. But when you want the organization like ourselves, when you are compliant, then the process is a bit difficult, right? And try to educate people that when you are sending remittance, it's best to send it to the legal channels rather than illegal. And when it comes to legal channels, there are a lot of requirements that we have to fulfill. So that is one impact that over 2013, 14, 15 people had. Like, people wasn't very comfortable when they are, has to declare all their earnings and then the documents and so on. So people now got used to from last few years, because when you don't have no options, then you comply. You comply, basically.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, in terms of Bangladesh Bank, we have some regulatory issues. What about UK?
I haven't just want to go back onto that discussion that you've asked me on Bangladesh banks. Bangladesh Bank, of course, they have focused over last few years that trying to give permission to other private banks and some of the government banks, like for example Sonali banks and others, to have an exchange house outside Bangladesh, so that sending remittance to Bangladesh, migrant people can easily send. Now, when there are company who is outside the Bangladesh jurisdictions, there are a lot of local policies, procedures that company like ourselves that we have to follow, right? So when it comes to that, then just to give you an example, there are recently you've heard that quite a few of the Bangladeshi banks exchange house subsidiaries has closed their operations here in UK or other part of the world. You see, it is a very difficult market where the competition is cutthroat competitions. The income is so slim, so you have to work on volume, right? You also have to see where you are operating. So if you are having say for example a branch in London in Whitechapel, right, on Whitechapel Road, and you open an office and say that, oh, from this office you only send remittance to Bangladesh, right? And whereas on the same road you have hundreds of other companies or Western Union or MoneyGram agencies where they do send remittance to over 200 countries, right? So one business cannot sustain in long term by providing service to one single corridors.
That's true.
That is one issue. The other issue is that the stakeholders, the banks, like for us to operate, we need a bank account, like Barclays Bank, HSBC, RBS. So the stakeholders also want to see that we make enough income, we generate enough income to sustain and pay for compliance, because compliance is one of the biggest costs.
That's right.
So if your market size is not that big and you don't make that much you don't generate that much income, then you also become a compliance threat to the banks. So the bank also doesn't like single corridors. Now, from Bangladesh, the assumption is that, oh, we've given permission to our exchange houses across the globe or in London or somewhere. We want them to purely work on Bangladesh corridors. So that is one contradiction, which is recently Bangladesh Bank has changed their policy. They are looking at their policies. And the other one is that if you want to send remittance to not besides Bangladesh to other corridors, you have to. I mean, if you are 100% subsidiaries of a Bank of Bangladesh, then the Bangladeshi banks regulate by central bank as well. So you also have to go back to Bangladesh Bank and then seek their not permission. You have to inform them that besides Bangladesh, you are sending remittance to other part of the world as well. Where Brexit, and for us too long term that we have sustained because we have kept our corridors open. Besides, of course, Bangladesh is our primary focus. I mean, being migrant myself, a Bengali, we also focus Bangladesh corridors first. but for us to sustain in the market, right?
Yeah.
And to
difficult
be
market
more
to sustain,
compliant,
yeah.
and it is very difficult to compete as well. So you have to have various corridors, and you also have to work through agent network. I mean, you're a businessman yourself. I mean, if you go into just branch operations, like you want to set up your own branches, then operating cost.
Operating cost, marketing cost, everything.
There's a lot of cost. Each, if you open, like for example, Sonali Bank, they had 6, 7, I don't know the exact number, they had branches. So managing each branch becomes very costly as well. So whereas Western Union and others who has got agencies, there is no cost, fixed cost for them.
Exactly.
So they work on incentive basis. So it is very difficult to compete. So I think the reason behind our growth and success is that we have had a long-term strategy, and we looked at the markets, how the market works, and we've also established ourselves like another global company where we operate through agents. But of course, managing agencies is a big risk for us. But we know our risks, and we have also put controls and plan in place to mitigate the risks. That is something that the regulator have to see, the Bangladeshi banks and others, that what is the capability of the organization that we have given permissions to? Have they got the means to mitigate the risks?
Exactly.
We can't just paint everybody with a single brush and say, hey, you can't have agencies because XYZ company or other company who have failed to manage the business. But now we are getting a lot of supports from Bangladesh as well, from Bangladeshi banks.
I'm really glad to hear that. And the fact that viewers, obviously, you understood the inside, very much of an insider information of how the system works. But one thing you mentioned, which in the business perspective, it's about the strategy.
Of course,
you've had a strategy, a vision.
You also need an experience. You have to know the business itself as well. This is a very niche business. Niche means that very high risk as well. I mean, your business is regulated. Payment service is regulated. You are in a regulated environment, so you have to respect the local regulations as well. I mean, other way, long term, you cannot sustain.
What makes Braxa, your company, that different? I'm not supposed to that different from other exchange houses?
I mean, do you mean by smaller exchange houses? As I said, the first of all is that, of course, we are a subsidiaries where Bragg Bank acquired the company, in 2011, right? So. And the biggest success behind the story is that the brand, one of them, and the experience of the person in that field, which is the brand is one of the biggest starting point, and then the experience, the people that in our organizations, myself and others that we have taken on board, and you have to have a clear strategy in place. A long-term strategy in place, and then you look at all your risk, market risk, and everything. So one is that the brand. Secondly, is the field, the experience in that industry. So combined, it is a success story where if you have a long-term vision and if you stick to that. So that is one of the success, and of course, it is our people, the community, who have trust on ourselves. I mean, in one of the meeting in Bangladesh, I said to one of our one of the meeting in Bangladesh Bank is that, look, yes, we are remittance dependent country, right? And if you look at the remittance comes to Bangladesh, right? $13-14 billion, right? It comes to Bangladesh, it comes to Western Union or MoneyGram or foreign entities, right? And all the remittance that comes to Bangladesh comes through agencies network. So why there is a difference of Western Union where they can have hundreds of thousands of agencies, through them the remittance can come to Bangladesh, and company like ourselves, you are restricting that we cannot we cannot take agents. And if we don't take agencies, you cannot sustain. It's not sustainable at all. So combined, and with the support of our people, the migrant people, all the communities here, that is the great support over the years that we had, and that is the success story behind our organizations.
Thank you very much. We're just going to go to a quick break. Viewers, stay tuned, please, and I'll see you after the break.